Welcome everybody to our last board meeting in November of Tuesday, November 29th. Can I have a motion to open the town board meeting, please?
I move to open the town board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna start our town board meeting. Jill, are there any announcements?
No, not for me.
Not even parking permits?
Do you want?
No.
Go ahead, Christina.
Sure, I'm happy to. So it's time to renew your train station parking permits and merchant permits. You can come in any time between 8:45 and 4:30. We'll do it while you wait. You can mail it in, you can drop it off, but it is time. The new parking year starts December 15th.
Terrific, thank you. Also, I'm remiss if I don't say, I hope everybody had a very, very happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And that you didn't eat too much, but that you were surrounded by loved ones, friends and family, so I hope everyone had a great day. Supervisor's report, I did have one quick announcement that I wanted to state. So in September of 2020, the town board adopted a facade improvement grant program for the Chappaqua Hamlet. And that's two phases. There's B information in the supervisor's report, but essentially this program is still applicable. It doesn't expire until September of 2023. So merchants in the Chappaqua Hamlet are able to take advantage of this to apply for, I believe, up to a $1,500 match. There are right, is that right? I think it's $1,500, and there are
Is it 1,000 or 15?
1,000, I thought.
Yeah, I think it might be 1,000. I
I
think.
thought it was 1,000.
Alright, well, we'll confirm that, I'll confirm that for tomorrow. But you're still eligible to participate in this. There will be details how to submit an application if anyone's interested. With the holidays coming up, it might be a good time to wanna refresh awnings or painting, etc. So I wanted to put that out there. There'll be information in the supervisor's report, but I know some people thought the program had expired. It has not. We have until September of 2023. So get your applications in if you are interested. Two other things. Polls are open until 9 p.m. Voting is very light at Horace Greeley High School today to vote on the Chappaqua Central School District bond referendum. So if you have not voted yet, I urge you to get to Greeley. Everyone in town who's in CCSD school district, go to Greeley to vote, not your normal election day polling place. All right, and then
Go
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just I realized that we I'm sure it's gonna be in the e-newsletter, but that the blood drive that they're having in honor of Charlie Bergstrom, were you going to announce that?
feel free.
Okay, so they are the Chappaqua Fire Department, is honoring Charlie Bergstrom, who is a longtime DPW employee. He retired as foreman after 37 years and also former Chappaqua Fire Chief. So they are having a blood drive in his honor Saturday, December 3rd, this coming Saturday from 9 to 3, and there'll be a link in the e-newsletter for people to be able to sign up in slots. So it would be a really great thing, whether you know Charlie or not, but you probably do know him and just don't realize that you know him. He's one of those guys. Anyway, so thanks for that. And do you want me to like spoil the surprise and let everybody know that the holiday lights are in fact going up this week?
Please
Long
do.
awaited?
Hold up on that surprise. Yeah.
Okay, I won't tell anybody.
All right, yes, they are. Community corner, very quickly, I wanted to just, in addition to wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, wish a few happy birthdays. Happy 7th birthday to Sky Stephen. Happy birthday to Brittany Phillips. Happy 8th birthday to Taylor Post. Happy birthday Charlie Grishman. And a big happy 90th birthday to Sylvia Balbo.
Yes, Sylvia.
Happy birthday.
Yes, so happy birthday. Those are upcoming birthdays. A few others that were recently in the newsletter. We had 3 8th birthdays. Carolyn Acasella, Oliver Leitner, Emerson Jar, and 4th birthday for Silas Hershon, and Bob Johns also had a happy birthday. So we wish the town of Newcastle wishes all of you a happy birthday. Again, if you have any announcement or special thing you would like to celebrate with the community, feel free to send an email to communitycorner@mynewcastle.org. All right, that is it. I think we're gonna move, unless there's anything else, we'll move right to public comment or new business. Okay, given the masses here don't have much to say. Carrie, is anyone online with a hand raised?
No hands are raised.
Okay, perfect. Well, then we're gonna move right to our public hearings. So we have three public hearings today. The first, I know Rob is super excited about, is talking about our 2023 budget. And the copy of the tentative budget was in the agenda for everyone to have. Take it away.
Guys, are we ready with the slideshow?
Do we need to, we don't need to open the public hearing first, we do.
We do.
Can I have a motion to open the public hearing on the 2023 budget?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now take it away.
And just one correction, I realize it was posted a little bit incorrectly in the agenda. Should actually be the preliminary version of the budget. The tentative version was the first version. The preliminary is what we're speaking to. There really weren't any changes between the two versions, but technically this is preliminary is what we're speaking on. Okay guys, next slide please. Okay, so welcome everybody to the 2023 budget hearing. I usually start it with a talk about the timeline, and this is a very lengthy process in town. We really start in the middle of July, and the process lasts all the way until actually December 13th when we'll adopt the final budget. So throughout that process, the beginning of the process starts with Jill and myself meeting with the department heads. It progresses to a tentative budget which is presented to the board. The department heads have the opportunity to meet with the board. That happened earlier in October. That gets us to the preliminary version, which we set the public hearing at the beginning of November, and we're now discussing tonight. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a little bit of tax cap information. This is the 12th year that we've lived with this, and each year the town has been able to stay underneath the tax cap, which is, I think, a great accomplishment by everybody involved, staff and town board and administration. We've been able to keep the budget within the cap each year. The tax cap is the lesser of 2% of the rate of inflation. I would love to see inflation at 2%. Unfortunately, it's not, but that's the max that we're able to use for the tax cap this year was the 2%. Another factor that goes into the calculation is what's called the tax-based growth factor. That measures the increase in our tax roll. The growth factor for the 23 budget, typo there, is actually 1.0083. It's up quite a bit from 2022. In using that formula, the town could have increased the tax levy by $846,299 to remain under the cap. We increased the actual levy by $802,632, so get about $43,000 under the cap. Next slide, please. Okay, this shows the calculation for the tax cap. We take in that middle column the actual levy from 2022. We add that tax-based growth factor and then the 2% tax cap. Underneath that, we get the carryover. Any amounts that you're not using from a prior year, there's a formula and you can use some percentage of it. We actually didn't, we were not even that close last year, 197,000. That's all we were allowed to carry over. That brings us to our tax levy limit, which was $23,640,588, and our tentative levy $23,596,921. As I said, we're about $43,000 under that levy. The actual levy change was 3.52%. Okay, next slide. Okay, chart going back about 10 years, just showing the actual increase in levy and the percentage increase. And the town, we talked a second ago about 2% being the tax cap. You'll see a couple years that the actual levy increase was over 3%, and that is factored in using the carryover from the prior year and the and adding the growth factor to that, we're allowed a little bit over the 2%, and we're still compliant. Next slide. This is a summary, the total budget summary for all the funds. You see the funds listed on the left-hand side, and that first column under appropriation, that's the total budget for each of the funds. The total budget for the town this year, $46,187,863,000. And there are three components. Basically the appropriation you can look as expenditure, and on the revenue side of that 46 million, we have about 20,534,000 in other revenue. We used about $2 million total in fund balance, and the amount raised by taxes is the far column. It's 23,596,921. Okay, next slide. Just showing a breakdown by fund of each one of the funds that we have. As you see, the town general and highway fund combined make up the largest portion of the budget, almost 2/3 those two funds combined. Okay, next slide. Okay, I usually start on the revenue side where I typically budget conservatively, kind of maybe estimate the worst case scenario, I think, on the revenue side, and sometimes hopefully I'm surprised by that and pleasantly surprised. For 2023, the key revenue sources, we have increased county sales tax to about $4.1 million. It was $4 million in 2022. A lot of the other numbers remain unchanged. I think with next year being a little bit uncertain, I know some of the indicators are trending downward with mortgage tax, which I've remained at $950,000. I think we'll get the second payment in about 2 weeks. We're gonna significantly exceed the mortgage tax number for 2022. But unfortunately, I think we're seeing the last couple months kind of drop off. That would be expected with the interest rates rising. The commuter parking fees, we're leaving that at $600,000. We're in the midst of that right now. It's been kind of hard to gauge. Residents have been slow to return, I think, to work to New York City, and has left the lot empty until probably the last 2 or 3 months when it started to fill up. So we're hoping that 600,000 we'll be able to reach that in 2023 as well. That is about 2/3 of the pre-pandemic number. So we're still kind of being conservative with that number. Building permits, again, with the economy possibly trending downward, we've actually increased that 50,000. Would have liked to increase it more, but we did increase it because we're looking at some significant revenue coming in from Chappaqua Crossing. They're beginning to build some of those units there, some of the residential units, and we should start seeing some of that money roll in next year. Concession income, that's actually where we book the franchise fees coming in from Cablevision, Altice rather, and Verizon. We've lowered that estimate a little bit. That's a percentage of subscribers, or it's a small portion of subscribers, and we've seen those numbers trend downward. That's just for cable TV services, it's not for cell service or anything like that. So we dropped that number just a little bit, and summer camps were remaining unchanged at 465,000. That was the goal this year, and we were right about on for 2022, so we're gonna leave it there for 2023. In the highway fund, there's very few sources of revenue outside of the taxes. The largest one is state aid for CHIPS, and that's what we get for road paving. And we've actually increased that number by about 20,000 this year, and the state has let us know that we could anticipate that increase. The water fund we'll talk about a couple slides down the road, but we are anticipating an increase in water fund revenue, 450,000 from general sales and about 291,000 from sales to Pleasantville. In the refuse fund, compost and mulch sales, we kind of bring that number down, and we've been bringing it down the last few years. We know we have the horizontal grinder that we're kind of easing towards the end of its life, and we're trying to prolong it as best we can, so we
Nursing
kind of cut back on what we're running through there. And the sales or the receipt of yard waste is about $30,000. That's unchanged from 2022. Okay, next slide, please. Just showing a historical trend for the revenues over the last few years. You see that top line, that's sales tax, and you see the significant increase that we've had. So going back to, I think the jump was probably at the end of 2019 into 2020, where the county increased the sales tax by 1%, and you see that increase there. Most of the other revenue sources have remained, fairly stable over that period of time. You see the mortgage tax, that's the other kind of magenta line, that jumped over the last 2 years. We saw a lot of that. That was a kind of pleasant surprise on the revenue side from COVID, where we saw a lot of turnover in home sales in town, and I definitely think that's gonna peak in 2022 and probably drop back down for 2023. Building permits over that period have remained pretty strong. Parking permits I talked about, that I think the darker blue line, the fourth line down, you see where we were. We had a high of 928, and then we've been dropping down after COVID, and we're hoping to bring it back up to 600,000 this year. Okay, next slide. Okay, the revenue breakdown for all the funds, you see the total amount of property tax funding, it's about 51%, so a little over half of our revenue sources comes from property taxes. A couple of the other bigger ones, see the largest single source is the sales tax at 4.1 million, the water metered sales 8.1 million, but that comes from the water fund. So this does talk about all funds, but the sales tax is the biggest single source in the general fund. Okay, next slide.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
just again, describe what's departmental income?
Departmental income, actually a lot of different sources for that. A lot of them are general funds. So a lot of that is recreation, is included in there, and summer camp is about 465,000. But we get another probably 400,000 or so from various other programs, whether it's the arts or children's, youth athletics, adult athletics, those types of things. That's included in there. Else I think the town clerk, permit fees and stuff from there. I think the building permits are included in that number for departmental income.
Thanks.
Is parking in there too, Ralph?
Yes, I think parking's in there as well, yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, over on the other side of the ledger with the expenditures, talk about first some expenditures that are affecting multiple funds. The employee benefits have remained fairly stable overall, as an expense category. Our health insurance, with an increase of 170,000, that's not terrible in the world of health insurance at the moment. We insure about, I think it's about 230 to 240 employees and retirees. And we have two plans, but the largest of our plans, MEPCO, we were able to see only a 3% increase on that year over year, which is pretty fantastic in the market right now. Most people that I'm talking to are seeing double-digit increases, and I know the state insurance plan, I think I saw was up about 12%. Quote me exactly, but I do believe it was double digits. So the town's membership in MEPCO continues to pay off. Last year we were below 3%, I think, and the prior year I think was actually flat. So we continue to benefit from that relationship. State retirement, not terrible again, about a $29,000 increase, not bad on a $2.2 million total budget for that. Workers' compensation, it's a little bit misleading. It shows a drop of 71,000 if you'll remember, we changed carriers from state insurance fund to PERMA. And the state insurance fund, the premium was higher, but we had a dividend offset. So it essentially nets to about a flat increase, but it does show up as a decrease in the budget. Our debt service for the year drops down by about $367,000. I have a chart later on that will show you the prior trend for the debt service and where we think that's going in the future as well. And legal expenses were up about 22,000 to 569,000. Keenan Bean had a slight increase in retainer after a few years of remaining flat. Okay, next slide. Some of the expenditures in the other funds. We have the highway fund, and once again, we've been able to add $120,000 to that budget for next year. Lisa, where were we when you first joined the board? I think we had about a $400,000 paving budget, and we've been able to add almost $1 million to that. We've gone slow and steady. We're trying to add 100,000 here and there when we can. Unfortunately, I don't know that 120 will. I think it's treading water for next year because the costs of everything have increased so much. But hopefully, we'll be able to pave the same amount we did this year. The next couple have to do with the winter expenses, the purchase of salt and the overtime for snow removal. The salt $295,000 and the snow removal overtime $195,000. Those remain unchanged. It's kind of hit or miss. Some years we win, some years we lose. In '22, we look to be right on target for our numbers. So, yeah, I know. Shouldn't have said that, right?
I was gonna say buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, I know. And brush and tree work, that's for our outside contractor. That remains unchanged at $175,000. The next fund, the water fund, unfortunately, we're seeing some pretty significant increases in price. Cost of raw water not terrible at about $25,000. Water plant operations not terrible at $56,000. That's just a CPI increase for our contractor. But the next two, the electricity for the water treatment plant, about $109,000 increase. And the standby generator service, as everybody knows, our generator failed and we are renting one at a significant cost. So we've got about $382,000 more than we did in the prior year's budget.
Hey Rob, is Pleasantville giving us any money toward that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so Pleasantville and the board just approved, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago, where we did a reconciliation. So we do that each year. So Pleasantville happened to we ended up with a surplus over the last couple years, and that was a true up from the last couple years. Once we have our audited financials, we will go back to them, and if we happen to have a deficit, then they will contribute their share to the deficit. So
I meant specifically for the generator though.
Yep. And when we replace the generator, the capital cost, they will share in the cost. I think about 19% of the capital costs Pleasantville's responsible for.
Great.
Yeah. The refuse fund, that remains unchanged. We renegotiated that pretty significant contract that took effect last year. There was no change for the first 2 years, or no change in price for the second year, so kind of caught a break there, no CPI increase or anything. And we think the transfer site charges will go down just slightly, I guess, based on the volume. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just a breakdown of expenditures across all the funds. See, the largest source of expenditures are contractual costs, and that's really kind of a catch-all. That could be gas and diesel, that could be legal fees. Just that catches a lot of stuff in contractual. Personnel costs, see about 29%, and employee benefits about 20%. The other two really significant costs there. Okay, next slide. This is a breakdown that I'd just like to provide, and it kind of shows how your tax dollar is actually broken down and the benefit that you're receiving. So this is just for the general and highway funds, and an average homeowner's tax bill is approximately $2,700 for these two funds. There are some other components to your bill, so that's not it, but if you break that down and you look and see what you're actually receiving, and I always like to point out the bottom right corner, the snow removal, $53 per household. I think that's a bargain to wake up after about 2 feet of snow is on the ground and probably still be able to make it into work the next day. Our guys are really hardworking all night, and I think that's a bargain. But you know, it shows your police service for $700 a year. We have a great police force here, and just some of the other costs associated with your average tax bill. Okay, next slide. Okay, I mentioned the refuse contract a minute ago, and just kind of wanted to add this chart. This one I added last year when the bill increased, and the columns represent what the town is actually paying, and the red line going across is what the homeowner, the cost per year for each homeowner. So you see at the beginning of the 2010s, in 2014 I think is when we went to 1 day a week refuse pickup from 2, and you see the cost to us drop, and we also dropped the cost to town residents. That stayed steady for about 7 years until unfortunately the contract, we had a 7-year contract at the time, finally expired, and we've had a significant increase in the costs, and unfortunately that's had to result in an increase in the annual cost to each homeowner. I mentioned before some of the significant challenges we have in the water fund, both in the short term and the long term, and I just wanna talk about a couple of those now and how that's actually going to impact our residents. You know, I mentioned a few of the operating expenses. The electricity is number one. Chemicals, water treatment plant chemicals, we've seen.
Rob, I think we need to switch the slide.
Oh, sorry, can you switch the slide, please? Sorry, missed that. Water treatment plant chemicals, we've seen time and again, unfortunately, we've had, even when we go out to bid, some of these vendors don't even wanna bid for a year. They'll give us either a quarterly or a 6-month price, and that's going up just kinda every time we place another order, it seems to be going up. So unfortunately, that's a fact of life, and standby generator is another one of the operating costs. Just wanna mention a few, and you can see on the screen, we have several pretty expensive capital projects that are coming up. Some of them have, we've started the work on some of them, and probably in the next, I don't know, I say 3 to 5 years at furthest away, we'll probably be working on all of these. We've got the water main replacement project that's going underneath the tracks. I think that we just approved the contractor for the engineering work.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. We have the water main replacement project going up Route 120, that's where the town is partnering with the county. The county is replacing the sewer main, and the town, to try to share and save some of those costs, is going in right behind them. Right, they're going in first, right? And we're going in after them with the water main. You know, we mentioned the backup generator at the water treatment plant, that's on order. I think unfortunately we're probably about a year out from that coming in. The roof replacement for the Millwood water treatment plant, I think we've identified our engineer, have we not? Yeah, for that project. The generator replacement for the Bedford Road pump station, I think that as well, we've identified the engineer.
If they're working on that.
Yeah. Generator tank replacement, I think we're just about to start that project.
Yes.
And the Vactor, we were gonna use that for catch basin cleaning, to help comply with the new MS4 regulations that we may be looking at. That we had applied for a grant, unfortunately we weren't successful. I think we're going to
Try again next year.
try again next year and hopefully get the funding for that one. That has not been ordered yet, but we probably will be in the process soon. Okay, so unfortunately, what does that mean for our residents? And that means that we have, we're gonna be increasing water rates in 2023. Currently, the base rate, and that's for out of district, is $85 per thousand cubic feet.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry, next slide. I'm hitting the button here and not realizing it's not changing. So the base rate that in-town residents pay is it's kind of on a tiered basis. And the base rate is $56 per thousand cubic feet up to 6,000 cubic feet. $70 up to 10,000 cubic feet, and 75 over 10,000 cubic feet. So what's been proposed right now is an increase of about $6 per thousand cubic feet. And we hope that this is going to offset the operating expenses this year and then some of the future capital projects, kind of defray how much we are going to have to borrow in an unfortunate borrowing environment at the moment. Just to mention, the average household uses about 3,000 cubic feet per quarter. The increase would amount to about $18 per quarter and about $72 per year. Okay, next slide please. Okay, we brought this topic up a couple years ago. It came to the forefront when the Northern Fire Protection District cost increased significantly, and this was a result of Mount Kisco, who provides the fire protection services in the Northern Fire Protection District. When they renovated, I think, 3 of their firehouses and went out for a pretty significant bond. I recall it's in the area of 15 million plus, I think. But unfortunately that resulted in an increase for the town. Next slide please. So just showing an average per parcel cost for the 3 different fire districts in the town. You see Millwood Fire District this year projected at about $1,037. The Northern Fire Protection about $734, and the Newcastle Fire District down about $469. So just to remind everyone, the Millwood and Newcastle are not part of the town's budget. We just include that as information for everyone. But they are their own taxing authorities, the town is not. Okay, next slide please. Okay, just a summary of the tax rate and how we arrive at that. You see the change in assessed value. The town increased a little more than 0.5% in the assessed value from 2022 to 2023. When I make a calculation for the kind of what I say is an average assessed value, just to compare year over year, apples to apples, I've had a baseline of about 170,000 in assessed value. That changes year to year with the market value based on the equalization rate. So you see a pretty big change in market value, and I think most people would see that if you look on Zillow and look at the price of your home, it probably went up in the last 2 years. Your actual taxes are based on the assessed value, not the market value, so that doesn't necessarily change. You see the tax rate increased about 0.87% from 22 to 23. The tax cap number is the same. We had about a 0.44% increase in the tax rate growth factor, and the total tax levy increased 3.52%. Okay, next slide please. This just demonstrates the total overall tax burden of a resident in town, and I just like to point out the share a lot of people don't understand, since the town does collect the taxes for fire districts, for the county, and for the school district, even though we don't get to keep those funds. But just to show that proportion, you see the purple and pink are the purple is the Chappaqua Central School District and Library, the pink is Westchester County, the town of Newcastle, and special districts. See, the total overall cost is, I think, a little over $26,000 for the tax bill. Can I have the next slide, please? And my dollar bill just kinda breaks it out, but school district and library account for almost 75 cents out of every dollar, or 75 out of every $100, I suppose. Westchester County about $9.50, and the town of Newcastle, including the special districts and the fire protections, about $16 out of every 100.
We're bargain.
Okay, next slide, please.
That's a really good visual.
I was gonna say, great
I love that. I
graphic.
saw somebody, I stole it about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I saw somebody else do it and I thought it was cool. I mentioned a minute ago about the debt service schedule and just kind of showing you as we sit right now, without any additional borrowing, and I'm certain we'll have additional borrowing. But when we borrowed last time in 2018, we talked about the kind of drops from year to year and how we were kind of gauging when we borrowed. So you see between 23 and 24, there's a big drop there. Also 24 to 25, then it flattens out, and then we have another drop. So we had a big drop actually from 22 to 23. I think it was about 360,000. So we try to time our borrowing every 4 to 5 years and kind of wait till we have a little bit of have some debt drop off before we add some new debt. Okay, next slide. The last couple slides have to do with fund balance for the town, basically the town savings accounts. We do have fund balance in each of the funds, but I really only talk about the 4 major funds: general, highway, water, and refuse. This is a historical chart. Just to remind everyone, the fund balance is published when we complete our financial statements, which are issued usually in May or early June. So that's not a rolling number. That number doesn't change throughout the year. We receive it with the financial statements. That's why the fund balance is reported as of 2021, even though we're almost at the end of 2022. If you look at that top magenta line, you'll see how the town's been able to build up their fund balance from what it was at the beginning of that chart. You look back, you see it kind of went up in 18 and 19, then slightly down in 20. That was a result of using some of the fund balance to offset our debt service. We anticipate doing that again. See, it went up in 2021. That was actually kind of a surprise due to some of those revenue factors that we were not anticipating, the mortgage and sales tax and building permits in particular. I do have a sense that we will see a surplus in 2022 as well. And then once we get into the further discussion of borrowing money, then we'll talk about how the fund balance will then be allocated over the next couple of years. Next slide. Okay, and I've got a slight projection here through 2025. I've kind of projected where I think some of the fund balance might go if we started allocating it kind of at the rate that we had over the past few years. And the town still looks to be in very good position with our general fund balance. So I think that's it. If anybody has any questions, the board first, I guess, and any residents?
No, I just wanna thank you. You always do
again.
such
Such
a phenomenal job. So thank you. In what's now gonna be a trying fiscal time, I think you've really done a great job. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I actually just have a few
Sure.
open questions, just about a few line items where I noticed that the preliminary proposed budget was a bit different than the year to date or the 2021 actuals. You've explained a lot of those with the highway department and capital improvements, but there were a few others I just had questions. They're minor and maybe you've explained them. I'm sure there are explanations for it, but for instance, the town board budget, I know that we have an extra 45 to 50 $8,000 in there, and I'm wondering if that's for, special projects
Oh, so
from the board, such as, the engagement sessions that we
right,
like to
there,
do, or
so
things
there's
like
money
that.
that's built into the town board lines for those special projects specifically for studies that the board has been doing or has planned to do.
Okay.
So there
Yeah.
was just an RFP let that we're looking for, survey services going forward. That would come out of those funds as well as any follow-up the board would choose to do.
Or
Okay,
even
yeah.
special projects, if there's an event we wanna put on, that comes out of
Yeah,
there,
and that's a
things
really,
like
that's a
that.
good thing. I mean, this doesn't mean that these are bad things, but I just
No,
wanna
no, no.
understand a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Also-
think there's a couple lines that are actually in the planning department. There's $50,000 in town board, basically town board consultants, if you wanna do studies, and there's 50,000 titled as the master plan or comp plan studies. And then there's some lines that fall right into the town board, and that's where we do town board special events, we have 20,000, town board special projects, we have 25,000, so and then we have like 10,000 for boards and commissions and 5,000 for council on race and equity, so we have money in a lot of different buckets that the town board has the opportunity to allocate.
Okay.
As part of the comp plan, the board had always envisioned that there were steps forward it would need to take and there would need to be funding. But we weren't necessarily clear until, we got there as far as what we would need. But we didn't wanna be thwarted in goals that we wanted to achieve because we hadn't anticipated a funding source to be able to go forward. And we never work on a deficit, so
Right, and I think
we
it's
don't
great,
spend
good to
money
be
that we don't
proactive
have,
that way.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was our attempt to make sure that the board had the funds available to be able to move forward with the projects that had been identified and also the studies that were required to move those projects forward.
Okay.
And again, come January 2023, the board will once again take a look at its goals and objectives moving forward, and they will lay out for staff where they need to go in 2023, and we will have the funding sources available to get you there.
Great, thank you. And I got just a couple more brief ones. There's the public health line where it looks like we just had 18,000
Yeah, so
today,
the
but then
public
we
health
have,
line, that's the grant.
125 for this year.
Yep, that's the grant that we received from Drug Free Communities Program,
Okay, so it's covered on the
it's
revenue side.
Newcastle United for Youth, so
Great, okay.
the grant itself is $125,000 per year, but it's an actual dollar for dollar reimbursement. So I do budget $125 for each side, expenditure and revenue. We haven't reached that typically, and especially during COVID time, they had to curtail some of their activities. So whatever we have on the revenue side, you'll see it on the
Okay, so COVID explains the
yeah,
low
significant
expense
drop,
side.
yeah.
Okay,
And they've
That's
also,
what
they had a
makes sense.
consultant for years, the consultant, I can't think of their name, but they are no longer involved, and they also had a full-time, or sorry, not a full-time, but a permanent part-time kind of administrator for the program.
yeah, that
And
was in the school district,
Since he
so
left a
I'm
couple
familiar
years
with that,
ago,
yeah.
they haven't replaced that position, so
Yeah.
so the grant, it was renewed for next year as well. So again, that's an expenditure and a revenue that equal out, and whatever we spend, we get back.
Okay, great. And then my last one was in the permanent improvements. I'm wondering what that is because we've had zero.
Yeah, permanent
There,
improvements is
And
that.
it's pretty hefty, you have 365.
Yeah, permanent improvement is combined with road paving, and it's just kind of a distinction we make. Permanent improvements, we have charged the portion of the road paving that is the kind of the underlying work when we've done the reclamation. And we haven't, Jerry Morshell was bigger on reclamation and the roads, and Bart has kind of noted that
It doesn't
we're not,
prolong the
right,
life,
we're not seeing the benefits of the reclamation. So when I talk about a road paving budget, I take what is in the road paving, specifically the line titled road paving and the permanent improvement line and I combine them. And again, sometimes we'll split that bill up depending on what was actually done to the road. Possibly if there was significant drainage work or something could have been charged to permanent improvement if that was done as part of the road paving, and just doesn't happen to be any of that this year.
Okay, great, makes sense, thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Alright, so should
So
we
much, Rob.
open it to the public? Is there anyone here in person who has a public comment? Perfect, so you can put through whoever's online. Hi Rob,
Can you guys hear me okay?
we can.
Okay, hold on. So I had a couple questions. One, earlier this year, we were talking about an unfunded mandate from the state, and I think you made mention of it, about catch basin cleaning. That was gonna cost the town a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
What is the update on that, and where does that show up in the budget?
So Rob, you talked about it with the vector, right?
With the Vector, and
Vector.
that was one component of those MS4 requirements. I don't think, well, I'm certain those have not yet been enacted. I don't know where that is on a state level. I know
Right,
there-
we had
So-
voiced our strong complaints to the state that they were putting an undue burden on the local municipalities by not giving us any lead time.
Right, I think it was gonna cost us like an additional,
Oh,
I wanna say $7 million,
oh yeah, it was in the
right?
millions.
It was in the millions.
And so we, along with a lot of other municipalities, all expressed our displeasure, to put it lightly, as to the amount of burden that was gonna put on towns when we couldn't increase tax caps and it was essentially an unfunded mandate. I have not heard back, and nothing has been enacted as far as I'm
Yeah.
aware
So as-
yet, but I'm anticipating
We-
it will be at some
yeah, to answer
point
Rob's
soon.
question, it wasn't anticipated in the 2023 budget because as far as we are aware, it's not going to be enacted in 2023 and it's not something that we have to budget for. That's a big amount to just put in the budget
Yeah,
until
throw in
we're
there.
aware that it's coming.
The other thing is that we were aware that we needed equipment, and so we went out to try to secure a grant
Yeah.
for the cost of the vac truck. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful this year. We were able to do like a postmortem with the grant people who told us what we need to do in order to be able to get it next time around, so we'll be doing it. So hopefully we do know that it's on the horizon, we know it's coming, we feel like we got a temporary reprieve, and we're hoping that when it is instituted, that they give us a little bit more lead time to be able to allow us to prepare, you know, you're talking about increased staffing, equipment, time, money, you know, this is, you know,
And
pretty
that
crushing
factor
cost.
is something that was on Jerry's wish list and has been on Bart's wish list for
list as
years. The piece of equipment that we currently have is
Inadequate.
not up to task, yeah, for what we need it for.
Yeah, we
Right.
can't,
But if-
we don't do all of our.
If I remember the discussion accurately, there was some debate about whether or not, you know, the increase in the amount of activity and the amount of cleaning was actually necessary. And is that still being discussed, or is it just a matter of whether they're gonna drop the boom?
So we're waiting to hear back, but certainly we were not the only municipality to question that, as well as the other expenses, so I think at this point, we need to wait to hear back. My guess is that it won't be handed down right away, that there will be another proposal coming out that we'll all be allowed to comment on again.
Okay, let me move on. Is there any plan to allow for electronic payments of the water bills?
So the unfortunate part of that is we've got very antiquated software at the moment for water billing. There was some software that we've had in place since 2005. We are looking at options to replace that. I think most current software allows that, allows the option to pay online. I don't have an exact date when we're gonna do that. We had borrowed
So
some money.
it's being looked into.
Yeah, it definitely is, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
We have other software needs within the town and we're trying to, right now, really, nothing that we have talks to each other. It would be great if some of that was integrated, whether it's the rec department, the town clerk's office, the tax receiver's office. Most of that stuff is a manual entry on my part, taking monthly reports from these places and then turning around and entering it into my system. So yeah, before we jump into the next software, we would kind of like to get we would like to look for something that talks to some of the other software programs we have throughout the building.
Right. I saw in the slide about the fund balance where we had some unexpected increases in the fund balance. And I'm guessing if that's compared to previous uses in the fund balance projections, is there an opportunity to use any of that fund balance now to lower people's tax rates? Or is it, given the fact that we're expecting in an increased inflationary environment, is the idea that we think we need to keep this stuff around?
Yeah, so I would say we are using $850,000 in the general fund of fund balance to kind of keep things stable and to remain under the tax cap. I would be hesitant to use any more than that. Actually, that's probably more than I'd want to use, but you know, we've had some increases in items this year and our goal has always been to remain under the cap. And you know, I mentioned some water projects that are coming down the pike. Those aren't the only things that we will see. We've got other capital projects and other items that have to be paid for too. So you know, we will be, as I mentioned, we've got these other projects that we're gonna borrow for, and what I did with the last borrowing was kind of use fund balance to offset. I took a baseline of what we I took a baseline of the debt service prior to that borrowing, and basically any of the excess over that baseline, I used the fund balance to kind of to keep us level. So I anticipate doing something like that again, where we will have larger allocations of fund balance once we borrow again to kind of help offset the debt service.
And Rob, I think given, you know, increases in costs for many of the things we need to procure, as well as unanticipated increases in things like we saw this year with our sanitation, et cetera, I think it would be imprudent in this current environment to use a significant amount of fund balance so that we have it available for all these unanticipated and even anticipated increased expenditures.
Yeah, and you know, another factor to be considered, and one of the unfortunate impacts of the tax cap is that if you use too much fund balance, if you go too far under the tax cap, you put yourself in a hole for the subsequent years. I mean, in addition to having greater expenses, you have then less of a tax levy
Sure.
to rely on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because each year you're kind of resetting the floor. And if you don't use some of that space, and you have significant budgetary pressures the following year, you don't have anywhere to go with that. So
That's one of the perverse aspects of the way the tax cap's calculated.
Exactly,
Yes, I
yeah.
do.
Sure, and it
And
doesn't even
unintended,
track
yeah.
the inflationary environment, it's
No.
basically capped at the 2%, which is quite low.
My last question, last comment is that the county again, and while they're going through their budget process, has announced they're cutting taxes. By a small amount, I think it's $6 million, I'm not sure what the total amount is. When you in a different slide, you put up how our sales tax revenue has gone up after the county imposed the 1% increase in sales tax that I think we get about, I think it's 20% of it or 10% of it, the additional 1%. And the county is now replenished its unassigned reserves, which were, I think, about 25 million at the beginning of this process. I think now they're expected to go up about 400 million. And my question becomes, at what point is it enough? I know that the counties, I think Westchester County is the highest rated credit rating in the entire state. And it would seem to me at some point there should be a conversation if they want to keep the sales tax without returning more of it to the towns, who seem to be under more financial duress than the county does. And I don't know when that takes place, but and maybe they'll answer it as part of their budget process. But the additional 1%, I believe they took 70%, and the school and the town got 10 and 20 respectively, which is a better deal for the county than the other 1% that's there. And I think at some point in time, there's some rebalancing that should be taking place. I think my understanding is that additional 1% is how it was sold and how it was marketed to constituents, was that it was to replenish the fund balance that had run down over many years. I think that's been accomplished. And I think some of that money should be coming back now to our town and to lots of towns to help offset a more expensive environment that we have to operate into. So I don't know how that process gets done. Or maybe they should just, roll back the 1%. But if it's going it shouldn't just be a permanent increase in tax on residents. And for a purpose now that I believe that it's fulfilled, absent other information, and I think, at the very least, more of it should be going back to towns like ours.
So Rob, that's a very good point. Obviously, we don't have any control over that, but when I invite our county executive to come speak and give an update to the town board as to the state of the county, I certainly expect you to be here in the front row asking that question. But it's a really interesting point, and I think it's something we should definitely ask.
Well, and I would hope maybe the Association of Town Supervisors might be looking for some answers there as well.
Yes, we are. We actually discussed it.
And Rob, you mentioned their high bond rating. Part of that is the fact that the towns collect their taxes and make the county whole. So they're guaranteed their tax revenue.
I understand. Look, I don't want to take up any more time. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Is there anyone else online? All right, great. So that being said, I think we will adjourn this public hearing. We generally would leave it open to written comments, correct? The thought is that at our last meeting of the year on December 13th, we'll be adopting this budget or, whatever iteration comes out of these discussions. So certainly why don't we, can I have a motion to adjourn this or to close actually the public hearing, but leave it open for written comments until
Let's do Friday, December 9th, at noon, okay?
until noon on Friday, December 9th.
I move to close the public hearing until noon on Friday, December 9th.
Well, you're closing the public hearing tonight and leaving it
Open for written comments.
open for written comments.
Just say
I
something.
move to close the public hearing tonight, but leave it open for written comments until December 9th.
I second.
Perfect.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you so much, Rob. All right, so now we're gonna move to a public hearing. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing on a local law to establish an open space fund dedicated to the acquisition, improvement, and preservation of open space land within the town of Newcastle?
I move to open public hearing regarding the open space fund.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so as many of you will recall, this is something we discussed as a way to establish a fund so that if land becomes available for acquisition, improvement or preservation within the town, we could potentially have the funds to purchase that or enhance that property. We set it up as a fund where we would look at it annually to see if we have additional income that we want to forward into this fund, instead of setting it up as a tax, which would implicate our tax cap. And we frankly didn't wanna tax residents at this point. It also would allow, if people wanted to donate money to the town for these purposes, there would be a fund for them to specifically put that into. It's my understanding that anything that goes into this open space fund could not then be used for anything other than the preservation and improvement of open space. So did I summarize it well?
That's correct, and passive recreation also is something that the purpose of this fund can be used for, or the money in this fund can be used for.
Alright, so why don't we opened it, is there anyone on the board who wants to say anything? Okay, anyone here in public? Alright, is there anyone online who has any comments on this local law? Did you say no inquiries?
No hands raised.
Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds. And then I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Keep it open for written
Do you wanna
comments.
keep it open for any
No,
comments?
keep it open for written comments until
Yeah, so this one, I will keep open for written comments until this Friday.
Yes.
The second?
the
Yeah.
second.
At noon?
Yep.
Alright, so I move to close the public hearing, keeping open for written comment only to this Friday, the 2nd of December until 12 p.m.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alright, and finally, can I have a motion to open a local law to amend chapter 48 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle to implement the provisions of 19 NYCRR Part 1203 concerning the administration and enforcement of the Uniform and Energy Codes.
So I'm sure Ed gave you some background.
We just have to open it first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very excited
Can I
about
get a
this
so
one.
moved?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alright, Drew!
Go!
Real pumped up
Yay.
about this local law. Just quick background, in 2020, the state updated the uniform code, the state uniform fire prevention code, building and fire prevention code, known as the uniform code, and the energy code, which is the energy conservation and construction law. So they updated that. In response, they then had to update the regulations that pertain to the enforcement and administration of the uniform code and the energy code. In December 2021, those regulations were updated. As a result, municipalities were instructed that they have 1 year to then update their own enforcement and administration programs for the uniform code and the energy code. So what this local law represents is just incorporating those requirements from the regulations. And it's all mandated by the state. There's really no room for creativity. We have to take their language and put it in the Newcastle code. So there's a couple things that we were able to decide on about, what building permits can be exempt, what operating permits we want to identify. But other than that, these are requirements that we have to follow.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I did see Tom DePole's on there for more technical questions.
So I was gonna ask Tom, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think Ed and Drew have done a fine job on this, and there's really not much, it's a mandated, process from the state, and we are compliant.
Alright.
Quick question, or a couple questions. On page 8, for section 3, 44-14 time limitations, I think there's a mistake. It says chapter 48, section 17. Is that chapter 48, section 14?
I'm sorry, Jeremy,
On
can
page
you
8,
just, page 8?
it says section 3, towards the bottom, chapter 48, section 17, entitled time limitations. That's chapter 48, section 14. 17 is certificates of occupancy. So I think that's just an error there, but that's number one. And number two, that subsection A, other than switching single family with multifamily, is there any other changes to that section from our current code? Unless I missed it, what's the edit here, other than that, is it just a flipping of putting single family first as opposed to multifamily?
Yes, that was the switch to clarify. We believe that change clarified the law a little bit. When I don't wanna pin it.
So it was just moving it different.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, just moving it to clarify that one is 12 months and then the non-residential are a little longer.
Okay,
Or
so
I'm sorry, 6 months and 12 months.
in 2 years.
Yes.
And then the last question I had was for Tom. Do we have issues, just curious, do we have issues with that single family or multifamilies other than what may be going on at Chapel Crossing, that this is violated, that it's an issue for the town? Or are we fortunate that it's
There
really
has
not?
never been an issue, and this is just a mandate from the state that we identify it.
Right, and that change, Jeremy, when we went through, we read every section of this chapter and tried to clean some sections up. So the change you see in 4814 was, this is
Just
not a
moved.
mandate by the state, it was simply moved to put single family uses first and to clarify that they have a year versus commercial have 2 years.
I thought I was playing Where's Waldo, I was trying to figure out what the difference was.
That was the only change.
Yeah, not much.
Alright,
And that was just clarification, that was not a state. The state did not say you had to put it in this order,
Gotcha.
anything
Alright.
that detailed.
Alright. Anyone here who has a public comment? Right, and is there anyone online? Okay. I didn't anticipate many comments on this one.
I was right.
So can I entertain a motion again to close the public hearing but leave it open for written comments until noon this Friday, December second.
so moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is all we have for the public hearings today. I think unless there's anything else, Jill, we can move right to resolutions. Okay, does anyone have them? I do. Anyone?
Does anybody need them?
Got him.
Okay, great, for the group.
Oh, you don't have them?
Thank you.
Okay, I move to authorize the hiring of Andrew Brown as a seasonal laborer within the highway unit of the Department of Public Works at an hourly rate of $15 per hour, effective December 19th, 2022.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move. You good?
You're good.
I move to authorize the posting and hiring of 2 motor equipment operator promotional positions within the highway unit of the Department of Public Works at an annual salary ranging from $57,407.93 to $78,611.49. The appointment of these positions will be subject to a 52-week probationary period.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda
Are
too?
we not
Yep.
doing
No,
consent?
we are doing
Sorry.
consent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
I move to adopt the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of the following: adoption of monthly reports for October of 2022, adoption of minutes for October 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alright, unless there's anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alright, thank you everyone for attending, we will see you in December.
Have a good night.